So glad you have made it. This is Through the Bible in a Year, or Read Through the Bible in a Year. Depending upon what version you have, we'll work through essentially both, and we will read through the Bible in a year. And what I'm trying to do is both encourage you, keep your spiritual muscles working out, and we'll go to gym, and you'll be in spiritual health. There's a few details that I should probably cover, but I'm not going to do it right now because I want to get you introduced. And there's some other links or whatever we can do to get you some background on who this guy is and some basic important things. But let's get started in Genesis 1:1. And I'll begin reading that. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning. Now, you need to go back in time. And this story is about the beginning of time. But there's God. There's kind of a catch to the text. It assumes, or really assumes you should know, that God has been there before the creation of the earth, the heavens and the earth. Wow. So you go way back in time, before creation, and there's God. Who created God? Where did he come from? And we can't answer that question because it's not answered. We can apply lots of conjecture, but it's just conjecture. God created the heavens and earth. As far as we are concerned, that is all we need to know, and that's all we can know. Maybe our brains would explode if we really understood how it all worked out. No conjecture. In the beginning, there's God. Now, I'm going to quote you the first chapter of John, and that first chapter relates, and I think it draws things together for you a little bit. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Greek is kind of interesting there. It's not a God, as some cults actually translate it. It's the God. The Greek right there has a definite article. Can't miss it, can't get around it. It's there. It's the one and only God. And yet, John is talking about Jesus. And Jesus is at the beginning of creation. So how does this all work out? You go back to Genesis, and right there in the Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, the word for God is Elohim. Elohim is a plural noun. It's as if there is an echad of grapes. It's one, and yet it's more than one. It's a little hard to wrap your head around. It's sort of like understanding something bigger, and that's why I want to get you started out on the right foot. A pool table is a two-dimensional game, mainly. I guess you can hop over the things and do some tricks, but it's played on a two-dimensional plane. And if something comes out of a third dimension and changes things, if you're just on that two-dimensional plane, it is so... Where'd that come from? From above. We don't know above. From below. We don't know below. From way out there. We don't know that on a two-dimensional plane. We live, as human beings, we live on a three-dimensional plane, or in a three-dimensional plane, and God is bigger than that. He's outside of that. Something interesting to me is it's very recent that they have insisted scientists, not particularly trying to prove anything about God, but they have discovered and named 6 dimensions. Now, there's some issues that are complex, but just let's recognize that there is more to reality than our human reality. And that's how I kind of answer, who is this at the beginning? We go back to the beginning. There is this oneness of God, this Jesus who's the Mashiach and the promised one of God. Before there's any real trouble, God already has a plan to solve that trouble that man creates. We're going to see that later. Like I say, you're going to have to tune in order to see how this all fits together. And there's a lot of fitting together. And we're just going to skim the top. But in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. So you might imagine him like there's Jesus standing back in time, and there's nothing but him or God, or however you imagine God. And it'd probably be best not to imagine him just as the guy in robe and sandals, because it's not quite right. This is the uniqueness of all of God, and together they're saying, let us create the heavens and the earth. And when you look at John, it starts to make more sense. And exactly what the apostle is trying to get at is that Jesus is the answer. He's the one, and you can read John later on, or you will if you go through the Bible with us. You will see that it kind of connects together, and it makes a vital jump into the reality of who Jesus is and what God's plan is. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I'm repeating that just to remind you where we're at in Genesis 1. We don't get too far. I'm trying to keep things short. Each video will be, I hope, fairly short. I will tell you more about me and the what to get and what to do, either in a link or another section. So we keep these things short. In the beginning, God creates the heaven and the earth. So you go all the way back to the beginning. There's the universe. And before that, there is nothing but God. That's it. That's how the story works in the beginning. And then God creates, you can go and read it, light. Now, there's something amazing that goes on, is it used to be thought by some scientists that the nature of the universe was just always eternal. And you still get some people that are out there, but today it's pretty well proven with some infrared background information that's gathered. And what they've done is they kind of run things backwards, and it kind of goes backwards to a beginning point, often called the Big Bang. The Big Bang. It's a shooting out of light. Amazing thing is that all the rules of today's universe don't apply in the first few moments of that Big Bang. It just does not make sense. And the way I read it is God speaks forth this command, and he shapes the very nature of reality on a three-dimensional plane for us to live in. That's his plan. But we're pretty close to the end of verse 1, and we are going to skim over some things as we go along. We're going to be looking at the days of creation, and we're going to spend time in Genesis. And I think that will give you a basis, and you will probably be reading. In fact, all the versions of Through the Bible in a Year all these versions start with Genesis, but they throw in other things. And we're not going to be too worried about that. We're going to get Genesis under our feet, so to speak. And then one thing that will happen that I want you to be involved with is to ask questions. And it's not going to be just drive-by shooting that occurs. We need to have a response back and forth. And I'm not going to answer questions that aren't asked. So you're going to have to ask some. If there's some questions, you have to make a connection. That's the only way I think I can do it. I will try on my own, and starting with Genesis, to give you a background. And then as we go on, hopefully you will be encouraged by your reading to ask questions. But please keep reading. Make the connection. Be part of what we're doing here. It's not going to be an insurmountable task. You'll be surprised. There's little bite-sized pieces, and you can do it. Keep reading.